Welcome back to the official launch of season 2 of A Relatable Journey. If you missed season 1, go check it out. But this is episode 1 with Johnathans Stewart, the all-time leading rusher for the Carolina Panthers, one of the greatest running backs of all time, a Pro Bowler, 2-time All-American at Oregon as well. But I love this conversation because so often we forget that NFL players and athletes in general are human beings. They have struggles, they have families, they have a life off the field, not just when we see them on Sunday. So they're more than just your fantasy running back. And Johnathans Stewart talks about his faith and who he is as a human being. This conversation is well worth the listen. Please enjoy this episode of A Relatable Journey.
I'm just one guy. I'm just a speck, in God's time, where I've gone through depression and, helped me be the man that I am today. I am a Christian that just so happens to play football well. My biggest why is my family. That's my ministry. Regret hurts more than discipline.
Johnathans Stewart, thanks for coming on A Relatable Journey, man. All right, let's get into your faith a little bit here because you have a strong faith. I remember when you, me, Natalie kind of first met, I believe it was at one of Josh Meadows' events. I don't know what part of Charlotte that was, but nonetheless, when did you kind of evolve in your faith and when did you take that into the NFL locker room? Was that always part of you?
Yeah, from very little, my mom always put me and my brother in Sunday school, whether she went to church or not. We were always on the Sunday school bus, getting picked up and going to church. As part of like my weekly schedule growing up, church was in it. I rededicated my life to Christ when I was in high school. We had our youth revival with Terry Cummings, basketball player, back in the day, and came to our church, and I decided to rededicate my life to Christ in high school, and so from there on, I was a youth leader. One of my mentors slash like father figure slash brothers slash like everything. He's like an X-file for me. Cecil Daniels. He was my youth pastor, and I was lucky to have him, guide me through my teenage days, through my college days, and just having someone there to go through life with, as a young man, and experiencing things, and getting through, life as a young adult, and the college process, and getting to the pros, and even still to this day, I'm married, and I'm a firm believer that you can't do this life alone. You need other men just like you around you to help you grow and help you be the best man and father that you can be for your family. And so I really, commend, Cecil for being that guy for me in my life that I can lean on and depend on to give me, some wisdom and point me back to Christ in a time where there's a lot of struggles. And, being in an NFL, and during my playing days, I've had my ups and downs and my moments, and, having people and noticing and understanding that God places people in your life for reasons like that to always, remember who you are and whose you are. And I just look at that as the grace of God.
And kind of to that point, in the NFL, there's a lot of self-adulation, there's a lot of cockiness, there's a lot of fan adulation. So how did you kind of manage the fan love with, your self-love and thinking you're the man, and versus giving the credit to God and where it's due? Like, you have the ability to do what you do because of him, not because of you.
Right. First, I think, whenever you are in a habit I call it habit because everything else we do, it's a habit, right? Whenever you're in your word, whenever you are praying, and whenever you are, acknowledging God in your life, those are firm foundational, um, you know, opportunities to keep you grounded. And I credit, that to, I guess, the pointing back to, God is the reason why you're here. If it wasn't for, God's grace and mercy, who knows where I would be. And, to be able to play in the NFL, that in itself shows me who God really is. To take a kid like me from Olympia, Washington, and places, these God-given abilities in my lap, and all you're telling me to do is just work hard and give you the glory. I can do that because I'm a firm believer that all things come to those who wait on the Lord. And the mindset of depending on God to show up must go hand in hand with you have a job to do too. And, my job with the platform that I've had, I feel is to inspire others to be great in the things that they do. And so whenever I play ball, the things that I do now, I do it in a way that, hopefully is inspirational to someone else to keep moving forward and to keep pressing on and to do it in a way that's memorable. And, it can definitely get, hard if you're not, being realistic with yourself as far as, who you are on the scope of the world, right? I'm just one guy, right? There's been trillions and trillions of people and living things before me. So I always look at, things from that perspective and that lens that, I'm just a speck, in God's time. And so who am I to say that I'm all that? And, I'm just honored and, with the opportunity to, be chosen to be alive and to get the opportunity to point people back to Christ.
Where was a moment in your career? I mean, you're the all-time leading rusher now with the Panthers, but it didn't happen overnight. But where was a moment in your career or in your life where you wouldn't have gotten through and you wouldn't have become the all-time leading rusher if you didn't have a faith, if you didn't, trust God and rely on him?
I mean, I've been injured throughout my whole entire career. So I would say, every season, I've had, ups and downs, and, and luckily I've had, people in my life that, loved on me, challenged me, and helped me be the man that I am today. And, there's moments where, where I've gone through depression and, with my health and the things that, I'll hear about myself, from the standpoint of, getting a contract and getting an extension and not being able to show up in practice and not being able to show up on game day. And one of the things that I learned through all that is, we have mind, body, and spirit, and they're all connected, and if one's off, it throws your whole world off, especially the main one is your spirit. And so if you're not connected there, and everything else may work, but it'll fall apart if that spirit's not connected. And so, just always, when you're feeling, lost or you're feeling hopeless, and you feel like there's, no way out, you just got to focus on, God and the things that, that he's brought you from. The stepping stones that he's laid out before you and behind you, look behind you every now and then to see the stones that he's already gotten you through. And he's gotten me through a lot. And I just feel like that's where at the end of the day, when there's anxiety creeping on you what's going to happen next. No, don't worry about what's going to happen next. Just focus on what you can do and know that God will do the rest.
No, I wasn't here when you were playing, but being in the locker room when we were allowed in the locker room, which I think we're allowed to again this year, I hope. I think some of the best conversations always relied around one, JJ's locker and the Bible. I mean, like whether it's Greg or the rest of the special teamers, or he's challenging somebody in that locker room just to like a good conversation. How much did just the Bible and Christ, and how much was that just prevalent in the locker rooms? I think people are generally surprised that the football locker room isn't just a bunch of males beating their chest, eating, drinking beers or whatever, the stereotype might be.
Yeah. I mean, that's what, if there's one thing that I miss, it would be the locker room.
Yeah.
The chemistry, the camaraderie, being able to essentially be big kids, amongst other big kids. And, but with that, I mean, you learn so much from so many guys. There's different cultures, there's different backgrounds, there's different, walks of faith. And every day, there's, before practice, we'll turn on some music, and, Saturdays would be, worship music, in the morning. We'll play, all kind of music and whatnot, but there's definitely a lot of opportunities where, we'll have like a Bible study or something like that. And, but then we got to go to practice, or we got to go work out, but then we'll come back and then, ask questions about, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you have this struggle going on at your house? Do you have this struggle with your kids? Do you have this struggle with your mom and your pops? Like, what does leaving and cleaving look like? Just a lot of real life, conversations and a lot of venting, it's a really safe space for a lot of guys to just be able to, lean on their brother in time of need. Greg was going through, a lot of stuff with his son. And he had his locker room guys there, and he knew that. I mean, that's probably something that he probably looked forward to just being able to come and just be himself and do his ball and be loved on, be joked on, all kind of stuff, And I think, there's definitely not drinking beers, beating on your chest, eating meat, whatever it is that people think that's the locker room today. All that stuff is changing out the door. Too many smart guys in those locker rooms now.
I mean, I've said for a long time on our show, Charlotte Sports Live, like these moments down here, I know Spartanburg is not glamorous. It's Sparkle City, and it's kind of like people roll their eyes and it's an arduous time. But like when you get to know your brothers that way, the way you were just talking about, that's when you fight for them on the field. Like that's when you are willing to suffer because you've learned something about the guy next to you, that you're willing to go through something that you wouldn't have before, because before he was just some dude next to you.
Yeah. When you know what that person's fighting for, and you know what that person's paycheck means, you'll do the extra mile. You won't want to let that guy down. And essentially that's what good teams kind of become. They become, teams that don't want to let, the person next to them down. And that's when you really get a good locker room culture.
I don't know if this happened to you later in your career, or if this was kind of ingrained in you because you were going to church all the time as a kid. But when did you, or was it ever an issue to realize what you did was football, but you weren't a football player? Like that wasn't who you were. It wasn't your purpose. Like God didn't put you necessarily here to play football, but as probably a vehicle to do something else.
I feel like that was always kind of ingrained in my personality. I've played football, but I've never really became obsessive over the fact that I played football. I'm a firm believer that, I am a Christian that just so happens to play football well. I'm a Christian that's a father. I'm a Christian that's a husband. I'm a Christian that's a friend. And I think if you, look at yourself that way, in the mornings when you wake up, you'll put that perspective and those lenses on as far as how you approach the day. And I think that's really important for believers to have that mindset, because if you don't, you'll fail in a lot of areas. But yeah, from very little, like I think I had that kind of mindset. So it's a blessing that that was instilled in me through my mom, through my youth pastor, through Bible study, through Sunday school. I don't know what, but I'm happy about it.
It seems like faith, and I hate the word religion because it's not, but it seems like it's all getting mocked more in the mainstream more than ever before. What would your advice be, or did you ever go through anything when you were mocked or laughed at when you were younger, to the younger generation that has a faith that doesn't feel comfortable leading in the locker room, either in high school or in college, with their faith? Did you ever go through anything like that?
Maybe, but no mockery of any sense. I mean, maybe behind closed doors or something like that. But I would say, dare to be different. I mean, you're already different in your own way. And at the end of the day, if you're an athlete, you're in a role as being a leader. And so if people are going to make fun of you, it's not going to be that many, because I mean, at the end of the day, people want to be you. And so I think that's what you got to carry in your chest, is that, there's people that want to be just like you. And so what message are you sending? I wouldn't say be the best version of yourself, because that can, be limiting. I would say, be who God has called you to be. And, don't fear any of the nonsense and the noise, because everything on social media is fake anyway.
Man, I'm so glad you just brought that up, because I remember you, Natalie, telling me that you deleted Instagram, I think at one point while you were playing. I wish I could delete all social media. I mean, Twitter's negative, Instagram is fake. Like, everyone's got their own like weird, quirky thing that isn't reality. And right. I mean, Instagram is dangerous, especially for a married man. Like, it's bad. And I make sure I do not touch or click anywhere or comment or double tap anything that I shouldn't be.
Yeah.
What was that conversation like with your wife? How'd you kind of come across deleting that when you were playing?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it was just becoming very unnecessary, I'm married, got a kid, and, anything that's distracting me from, my purpose, before it was just football. So distractions weren't really, as, deterrent, I guess. And so, but when you add in the mix that, all right, I have lives to take care of here, those distractions that, right now I have football, I have this family, anything that could potentially get in the way of me focusing on that, especially during a time of transition. Transitional periods are where the devil, I feel like, is, very opportunistic. And, though I think this was the last year of me playing with the Panthers. So just knowing that the timeline was kind of crunching down. So, you got to make those decisions for yourself as far as what is distracting and what's not. We can spend hours and countless hours a day on Instagram and get nothing done. And so, what are your goals and what are you trying to do and what message are you sending to your family? I mean, we're guilty of it all the time, because, I mean, we live through our phones. And so it's kind of, putting things in place to really, set yourself up for success.
You mentioned your purpose. What is your purpose? When did you figure that out? How did you figure it out? My why, I call it my why. Oh.
My why is my family. And I think throughout a person's life, your why changes through the course of time. But my biggest why is my family. That's my ministry. And, every day, I pretty much grade my life on that. And you don't want to be too hard on yourself when you're grading yourself, because you can definitely do that.
That's what you have a wife for.
Yeah. There's a lot of times where you might feel like you're a failure, but, at the end of the day, if we were all perfect and we had everything together, I think, we would miss the meaning behind, why we have a Lord and Savior. But, my why is my kids, man. Is really just leaving a legacy of whose they are, most definitely, and what that looks like. And so every day, that's what I'm up to.
Your journey, what kind of advice would you give somebody based on your specific journey? One piece of advice.
Regret hurts more than discipline. My Bible study mentor, leader, Mike Bunkley, shared that with me one time. And, a lot of people don't want to get up in the morning and do the things necessary to thrive. They don't want to do the extra rep. They don't want to be out in Spartanburg sweating in the heat with shoulder pads on. But they all expect, to have great success. But when those things don't come to fruition, they regret not doing those things necessary that would have probably gotten them over the hump and over the horizon. So, I would just say always go the extra mile when you're doing something meaningful, and, just keep pressing on regardless.
I think as we're going to release this training camp is wrapping up now as we tape, but I think we're going to release it as we start. And I mentioned Spartanburg. What does your stomach flip? Do you get anxiety?
Well, what I've realized is you have to have something wrong with you to go out in the middle of the day in the heat with pads and sometimes wearing sweats underneath your pads to train your mind for the feeling of being exhausted.
Is that why? So like Baker did that on day one, and Baker admittedly said that he's just stupid. He has to learn about by himself. Like, what's with DJ Moore wearing hoodies at practice when it's 95?
It's more of like a mental training, right? And it's good to always stay warm and all those things. But I always wore sweats or something underneath my pads just because it was a mental thought process of, if I can deal with the heat plus this plus that, then I'll be okay. But it also served you as a air conditioning unit, once you got a nice little breeze.
You tweeted, and we're going to get into your faith here in a little bit, and this might need a miracle, but you tweeted that the Panthers are going to shock the world this year. What makes you say that? I mean, we've seen 5 wins, and I think they are better this year, but their schedule does make me nervous.
I think a lot of teams are going to surprise a lot of people. I think this is one of those years where, there's a cloud in every division, right? And I feel like there's definitely a cloud in ours. And with the Saints, Jameis, I'm pretty sure he's going to come and throw for a bunch of yards and whatnot. But I don't think they have, the quality leadership that they've had in the past. I think Tom Brady, you don't want to count him out, but I also think that their defense last year wasn't that great. And I think this year, they got a lot to prove. And you look at us, I just feel like we have the pieces, and I think everything's going to really come to, whether or not we can stay healthy, and whether, the young depth chart in certain positions, really take this time during training camp to really develop and grow into what they're called to do, which is play football and play it well. And don't ever count out the fact that we have arguably the best running back in the league. And he is a guy that I think will just, shock the world again. I think a lot of people are counting him out and counting him out of conversations, but, this guy is, once in a lifetime talent. And that's what was missing last year. And so you take him out of the equation with last year. And then you have, offensive line, with depth issues. And then you have a quarterback position that's, been struggling for some time now. I feel like this offseason, we made those moves, to give us an answer. And I think Baker being added to that quarterback room, that's a guy that wants to win games. And that's a guy that's also going to, channel the X factor and his teammates around him. So I think we're going to shock the world.
I mean, you mentioned some of that stuff. It's like people forget that you guys, like football players, are human beings. And I've been trying to tell people that this quarterback competition, whether it's a quarterback competition for real, I don't know. I think it is because it's Sam's job to start. So I think you owe him that. But I also think it's because, listen, he's got friends on this team. He's got buddies on this team. So for Matt Rule, you can't just come in and trade for Baker, who doesn't know the quarterback, and just plug him in and play. Like, you can't do that. It's not good for human beings.
Yeah, I think what people have to realize is just because Baker Mayfield is added to the depth, it's not an automatic, he's the starting quarterback. And even from the standpoint of me saying you add Baker to the mix and he provides a attribute of bringing out the X factor of his teammates, that goes from anywhere he's on the field. I think he's that type of guy where his personality, his leadership in the lunchroom is something that's missing. I think, the locker room presence, from that standpoint of the quarterback position is missing. And I think that is something that he can give and help Sam. You know what I'm saying? I think those attributes in that room collectively, has been missing, especially from the age. They are similar in age, the competition's there, and it's going to bring out the best of both of them. And I think, at the end of the day, the quarterback position is the most important position as far as the success of this team. And I think that is an opportunity of a lifetime for both of them to rise to the occasion. So I think one of the two is going to make the most of it, and I think we'll be pleased.
During this time of year, one of my favorite questions is, like, to these young kids when they get on the field for the first time, is like, what moment did you realize this was no longer the SEC or the Big Ten? Do you remember your welcome to the NFL moment?
My welcome to the NFL moment was in practice, training camp, Spartanburg, Sparkle City. Thomas Davis, number 58, linebacker, used to play safety for the Georgia Bulldogs. The mayor of Charlotte is what I call him. He hit me so hard.
Back when you could hit in training camp.
This was during two-a-days, true two-a-days. I got hit immediately when I got the ball, okay? And this was a power play. Going right up the middle, and he's outside linebacker. He hit me immediately when I got the ball. So imagine him timing up a blitz and hitting me immediately when I get the ball on a power play. I mean, I'm in the A gap, okay? And he's on the edge. That's how quick it was, and that's how hard it was. And that was my welcome to the NFL moment. But shame on him, because I went crazy after that play, and I started hitting everybody on every run I had. And that set the tone for me for the NFL. Man,
Jay Stu, that was awesome, dude. Thank you for coming on our relatable journey, man.
Oh, no doubt, man. Appreciate you.
Thank you for tuning in to A Relatable Journey. However you watched or listened, please tell your friends, and also 5 stars, a like, a subscribe, whatever it takes to help spread this message. We appreciate you, and thank you again.